Welcome to the Mindfully Gay podcast. I'm John.
I'm Jerry.
And I'm Nick. Today's episode, Feeling Edged Out, explores some challenging but important topics within our community.
Join us as we discuss the journey towards self-acceptance and finding our place in the world. Let's get started.
All right. Well, here we are for another episode.
Here we are, guys. Hello.
And now you've put me on the spot.
We have put you on the spot.
So, we kind of go through this interesting process, right? Like, what's our topic going to be?
Right.
And it seems like I start reflecting on some of our prior episodes, and I think, maybe we should go back and do this or touch on this. And so I think this is what we landed on in our text messaging, I think yesterday. And so I had this question, and it comes from conversations with clients, and then just my own reminiscing on stuff. But my question to us is, what aspects of gay, queer community often concerns us or sometimes edges us out? And I use that word edge like, if I get edged out, I'm uncomfortable about something. And it's easy to project it on someone else, but often it's my own edge, right?
Yeah.
And so my question is, are we conscious of what those edges are? And do we just accept those edges? Do we blame others about them? Or how do we work them out in our own life?
Right.
And what are some of the resolutions we found about those? So within the gay or queer community, are there things, topics, behaviors, attitudes, assumptions that edge us out, that might even be an echo of our own internalized homophobia?
Oh, interesting. When we were kind of exchanging, and kind of going through this, the thing that popped into my head, and it just popped into my head now, as far as my immediate response to this, I'm recalling a situation that happened to me a few years ago. I consider myself now, as I'm getting older, very much more introverted, but I was very much an extrovert kind of in my earlier years, so I can kind of play both sides. I prefer being introverted, and I'm more comfortable in that space. I can easily just be by myself and get very energized in that setting. But I used to be able to just I wanted to be out in crowds and groups and things like that. So I remember being invited to kind of this swimming brunch party, and I was excited to go, and I went. And I was going to meet some new people. I certainly knew the host and all of that. And we were sitting around the table, and I guess we were having our lunch, and people were just kind of introducing each other and like, oh, what do you do? Who are you? And all of that. And when it came to me, or it seemed like, at least my perspective and how I was receiving all of this, because I didn't know a lot of the guys there, they'd say, they ask, what do you do? Like, oh, well, I teach yoga. Oh. And then turn to another person,
Do you make money?
and okay. And so that happened a couple times, and if I was trying to explain a little bit more about what that is and that kind of thing, it would just be this, oh, okay. Yeah, and turn to someone else. And I felt so negated and ostracized.
Can I ask you, what do you think they were looking for, though? What was the response they wanted?
I don't know.
Right.
I really don't know. Because obviously, what I felt was I wasn't giving the right answer, and so all the questions were going through my head. Like, am I not saying the right thing? I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not in the right career. I don't look right. I mean, all the stuff was just running through my head, and what happened to me was I stopped going to social events after that.
Yeah, of course. I would too. In a second, I would not want to be a part of it. Yeah.
And I mean, I don't have kind of that second part of that question, I don't have a resolution for that, but it was just something that was very, you know, very aware of what my feeling was in that moment. I just felt like I just sank away into this hole. I was like, oh no, this isn't right. This doesn't feel good. I don't want to be here. And I just extracted myself from kind of the social scene for a while.
Because it's hard to penetrate. And I think, and that's, as Jerry, as you're bringing up the thing about what kind of edges us out, we were talking about this yesterday during training. Like, I'm not going to name the person's name, but individuals that, there's like, I know who the person is. I've known this person for years, but if they see me in the gym, let's say they're going to pretend to ignore me or whatever. And it's this social awkwardness that I have seen my whole gay life among gays, definitely living in Boston, definitely in the gyms. I guess that's just kind of where I was, I too am a bit of more of an introvert, but getting out into a gym space is kind of a social vitamin for me.
Yeah.
And it's there that I would often interact, well, at least see gays, but it was like there was just never any type of communication, and it was just always so awkward to try to penetrate that veil that is around all of us. We're not supposed to talk. We know who each other are, but we're not supposed to talk to each other. And it's just this I don't, maybe it is this we're all feeling introverted thing, and it's hard for us to connect thing. But I know that, when you said, Jerry, edges you out, the way that what I like to do is I like to combat it with making eye contact and saying hello to someone. You know what I mean? Like, if I know, like, I'll just go up and talk to them or say hi, so it is kind of pushing myself out of that veil, I guess, the veil that I keep around myself when I'm in community, kind of opening up out of it and just trying to engage with individuals and have an actual, like, eye-to-eye contact and speak to each other and exchange that's healthy. But that is very difficult to do because, I don't know, I think like what you just said, Jerry, like people can fire off, we were just talking briefly about politics and stuff, and people, in terms of legislation for gays and what's going on, it's one thing to come together as a group and physically demonstrate and be, do something. But it's just often the case that what people are doing is they're from their armchair, from the the comfort of their own beds, they're firing off a 2-sentence thing. They think they're being political, and so that gives them the ownership of being upset about the situation, but they're not really doing anything. There's no contribution. They're living in the virtual world, and that's exactly the problem. I think a lot. I'm sorry, we're getting there. I think that's a lot of what's going on in our community right now. Is there's way too much living in this virtual space, and there's just not enough of this tangible, like, we're talking to each other. Yeah, it's inappropriate to ask people what they do. That's just what I've always been taught. Like, it's not a way to introduce and get to know people. I don't know if one part of my family is all about that, another part of my family is not. And I've just found that I've kind of learned that in situations where you're starting to be social with people, or you're starting to get to know them, asking them what they do for a living is sometimes a taboo thing.
Right. And I don't think in that situation, for me, that I wasn't upset that they asked what I did. It's just how they responded to my answer. Because what I was expecting was, oh, well, tell me more about that. That sounds cool, or whatever, just to generate conversation.
Well, I was going to say, I'm a very proud social worker. Like, I think as a profession, we are far more superior than psychologists or other disciplines. But if I go to a party and say, I'm a social worker, right? They see child welfare worker, and I'll get the same thing. If I say I'm the clinical director of Pride Counseling,
it's sexier.
Yeah, like that sounds like people are looking for some layer of show me how valued you are, right? If I say there's a difference. If I say I'm a therapist, people walk away.
They're afraid.
Right.
But if I say I'm the owner and operator of,
Yes.
So I just have found it's a very different kind of thing. But I want to build on this a little bit, and I'm going to speak about what my edge is a little bit. And and you brought up virtual. But I'm going to tell you that this has been my experience before Facebook existed, before the internet existed, right? And that is, I have never felt good enough, sexy enough, masculine enough, gay enough, young enough, old enough, butch enough, right? I was thinking about this morning when I was working out, is that I have always kind of felt somehow that I'm outside of the clique, outside of the circle of belonging. And I've had moments of that, but generally speaking, and I would say that those voices have been amplified through social media. And definitely like Grindr, Scruff, we're going to get sued now. But some of those app organizations, and I think there's a lot of factors into that, but overall I think for me there's a lot of social marketing around gay looking a particular way, and you're not going to find me in that messaging. And I think in working with a lot of clients, I've heard that as well. And so then it becomes this projection of them and me. Am I making sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I see this box, and there's a certain criteria that fits the gay box.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time I don't feel like I can check all the things in that box, and so I just feel like the outsider.
Yeah.
And with that example I gave, it just was amplified. Like, I don't fit here when I thought I did, but obviously, air quotes, I didn't. So I resonate with that. Just, there's some, I'm not good enough in this. I don't look a certain way. I don't act a certain way. I'm not this, I'm not that. I guess then I just don't fit into that category or criteria. I don't fit the criteria of what gay is in this day and age.
Well, and then I do think there is a reality to this. I do think there are, like, social media markets. Like, I'm just convinced a lot of gay guys don't own shirts. Like, I think there's a shortage of buttons and shirts.
Period.
I have sometimes messaged some of my friends to say, do you need a money or loan or something? Because I will help you buy a shirt. And yet I like that sexy stuff. I like that kind of energy.
Right.
And yet so I think there is kind of some packaging there. And I don't think this is unique just to gay men.
No.
Right? So I think lots of marginalized groups have experienced this through media marketing, where they've been stereotyped or marginalized in such a way that, when was the last time we found like Native American models? Right? Or what are some of the stereotypes around Latino or black men? Or right? Like, there's very particular kind of pockets that they've been promoted in.
Right.
And I think, for me personally, and maybe you guys will relate to this, I know that often triggers my own, I would describe my reaction sometimes as my own internalized homophobia, because then I feel compelled to try to show up in a way that isn't authentic.
Yes.
I'm trying to show up in a way that I think is marketable.
The advertisers want you to appear to be. That's what it is. It's when American Express gets behind and endorses an idea of what a gay person is supposed to be like, and you feel like you have to live up to that because that's been checked okay. Like, that's okay by American Express or by billions of dollars of industry or whatever it may be. And I get it, and it makes you show up, and it compels you to show up in an unauthentic way, and that's no way to connect with the community. And I think, we say it all the time, but that's why we have to do things like game night. That's why we have to do things like a book club. That's why we have to host movie night. We just need to have people over and have regular conversation and start to, within our own community, just build an understanding of what a gay person is supposed to be like. I think your example, I totally get your example where you're coming from. I would like to better understand though, Jerry, if these things were happening before social media, where was the understanding of what a gay person was supposed to be like? What was it for you? Like, do you know what I mean? Before Facebook, even, you were saying, like, you were feeling these ways, like you could get edged out by, if you weren't enough of this or whatever. And I'm just curious, because for me, in my gay life, I do remember a time before the internet, but it was pretty brief. Actually, I mean, I graduated in 2000 from university. So yeah, internet was really roaring by then, I guess, and I guess gay social was starting to pick up, and so that was starting to happen then. But I think my entire understanding of what a gay person is supposed to be has been molded by social media.
Well, that's because you're the youngster of the group. Because I think, if I think about what was available to me in the 70s and the 80s, they were scary pictures. Like, for instance, there was a whole genre of films that were done in the 80s when HIV was at its peak that were these pathetic stories of gay men withering and dying.
For sure.
I think one of the bigger films that went out, I think it was called The Band Played On. But the 4 or 5 guys, yeah. And so you have like the catty bitch, and you have these really dramatic kind of characters, and it was groundbreaking because it was telling our stories. But those stories were just like, oh my God, right? Or they were like these over the top flamboyancy kind of stuff where I just remember every image being somewhat scary, and I think I told one of you recently, I remember the first time I went to a gay club, like, I secured my wallet and my keys because I thought...
Because you were afraid of us.
Yeah, I'm going to get attacked and groped, and was so disappointed when I didn't. Right. Which triggered another, like, what's wrong with me? But I was also went, and, so there was a lot of... there was so much uncertainty and so much fear. And what's interesting is I remember some of the guys I dated back then, and they're like, oh, if you want to, because I was a baby gay and I wanted to go check out the clubs. Oh, no. Yeah, you can't do that. That's not for you. Right? And so it took a while for me to even give permission to gay friends and companions and friendships. And that started to normalize things. And so that was my experience, and I don't think AOL came around until early 90s. And if you could get into the M for M chat room, that started changing things for me. And so, but I will tell you, as an older gay man, I don't see myself on social media at all. I'm not even sure where I see myself in the gay narrative, the gay cultural narrative. I think we're starting to get some visibility because, frankly, the generation before us was wiped out, and so I think we're kind of like the first wave of queer seniors.
Social media generation, like, for sure.
Yeah,
this is a first.
I can resonate with this too, because my influences were just, I mentioned another show that I watched a lot of television, and so it was TV shows, sitcoms, commercials even, and some movies back in the day, 70s, 80s, and so the images of gay people were, kind of these extreme stereotypes.
These unhappy people.
And they're unhappy people.
Right.
They're usually the sidekick, they didn't have partners, they really didn't have lives, really.
They're all white.
They're all white. And if they were black, they were just so flamboyant.
Or heavy into drugs.
Just all those stereotypes. And so when I saw those, it was, oh no, I can't be that. So I didn't kind of going back to that question of, do I need to shift and change, become this shapeshifter and become that in order to be accepted? In this case, since that looked like a negative,
Not being
Yeah,
those people are
right.
never going to get accepted.
then I'm never going to be accepted. So I have to make sure I'm not that.
Yeah.
And so really dialing it back in a way that to be sure I am not that. So if I'm not that and I'm not this, like, well, where do I
Right.
fit?
And so, which further drives wanting to be a fucking introvert, right? It's like, why don't I just
Right.
not engage and have to make this
Oh.
ridiculous decision at all?
Well, but that's one of the dynamics that from the inception of Queer Spirit
Yeah.
to now,
Yes.
the challenge we have, I think, with a lot of our events and definitely the retreats, is there is an anxiety
Yes.
about showing up and being in community.
Yeah.
And I think I shared this story about the individual who came several times but could never get through the gate
Yeah.
because he was convinced that he didn't fit the profile of the right kind of gay.
Right.
And it really informed us about our advertising
Sure did.
because at that time we used a particular image that to me depicted this image of spirituality, but all this person saw was this guy with this beautiful body.
Body type.
A
And
body
he
type.
did, yeah.
It's like I'm
Yeah.
not that.
But the challenge, right? And I hear from people frequently who say, "Yeah, I really thought about going to your retreat, but it just gave me so much anxiety because I don't know if I could coexist with it."
Participate.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll fit.
So, I think this is a good conversation, but I want to tie it into when we think about what we each kind of identified. How does that reflect back on our own? Right, the edges are it's pushing me up against something that is mine. Right, and I think in many cases, right, it's that internalized homophobia. If we know that, then my question is, what is our responsibility? Like, how do we directly shape the experience so that we're honoring our own authenticity and challenging those assumptions and moving beyond?
I mean, that's an excellent question. I mean, it is, but how do we? It's there's so much fueled. This is so much fueled by the fact that it is still so controversial to be gay. And legislation that's being passed even now, you know, the ridiculous things that are on the table for these politicians and the way they're pulling on our rights, and you know, abortion is where it's at right now. They're all talking about gay rights are next, you know, and it's so it's fucking frightening. I don't know, it's frightening sometimes to try to understand how you fit in this world where it's still just it just angers people for you to be here, and so I don't know. I love that question. I don't fucking know how to do that. I don't know my authentic self yet. I don't think. I'm trying to be that person better. I'm trying to be less reactive to things that do edge me out, or that force me into a place that maybe isn't who I want to be. But it's work. It's work all the time. It's not some, I don't know. The way you just said it is the dilemma. It's definitely the dilemma for me.
It is a dilemma. I'm running through my own little Rolodex brain here and just like trying to think of what have I done? Because I do sit with that internal homophobia and that fear, you know, of being who I really am out there. So I'm trying to think, well, how am I getting through? How am I okay? Right? And can do my thing and try to show up as myself as best as I can. And the things that are kind of shuffling through my brain at the moment are, in a way, just accepting that, and that's hard to even just wrap your head around. Just accepting that, okay, I don't fit that model. I don't fit that criteria. And then, but what do I fit? And that's when I turn back towards me and say, well, what do I like? What do I like to do? what turns me on,
Yeah.
what excites me,
What are you
makes
grateful for in the
yeah,
mornings, right.
what makes me happy, not what makes that person happy. Because you teach yoga, oh, whatever,
Right.
and like
Right.
I don't have to change for that person,
Definitely no yoga for that person.
right? And that's a part of it. It's I I actively if I will actively pull myself out of situations. If I don't feel comfortable, then this isn't my vibe. This isn't for me. This isn't going to enhance who I am, and I'm not going to be in a place where I can enhance who they are. I'm going to leave.
No, and you're not going to sit there and bash yourself in the head with it. That is truthfully, John, in my opinion, that's sign of growth. That's definitely a sign of maturity in a situation. I know exactly what you mean. You're observing what it is, and it's ridiculous, but you just have to kind of accept that that's what it is,
Yeah.
and you have to understand that that's just not for me.
It's just not for me.
And that's a tough thing to do.
It
But
is.
I know what you're saying. Like, I'm the same way. Like, I when I get into that place, I have to just continue to remind myself of what are the things in this world that compel me. I love helping people. I want to be in service to my community. I have to just kind of bring myself back to this place, because it's, when you were just talking about going to a party and meeting people and being social, my first thought was, I'm going to have to pregame before I go. I'm going to have some drinks because I'm too anxious to go into these situations and talk with people because of the situation I just told you, Jerry, where it's like, I know half the room, we've talked before, but they're all going to pretend like they don't know me because that's what gays do. And it's just so... It just seems so, I don't want to, it's just grody. I don't want to get into that. And so like you're saying, John, I just feel like, well, I'm just going to step back and remove myself from this part of it. But I think the thing that we're all doing here is we're then turning it back around, and we're trying to create a community that we don't feel that way about, that we feel that we can be our authentic selves with. And maybe that's the remedy to this situation, is we have to kind of create that space ourselves, because what we're finding is that's out there now is just not, it just doesn't feel like it's the place for me, in a sense.
Yeah.
Do you know, the game changer for me, so I'm gonna talk about this, but I guess what I want to say first is, I think the value of this podcast is, I'm sure all three of us have our little fan base and people have a story about us. And one of the reasons I think this is valuable is I think in that transparency, people might be able to see themselves. And so, like, there's this part of me, the therapeutic part of me says, oh, well, clients should know these things about me, right? But then there's another part that says, how therapeutic is it to know that, hey, we all wrestle with these issues?
Right.
But for me, a game changer is I met my first elder, Clyde Hall, almost within the first 5 years of coming out. And the thing that most perked my attention about what Clyde was sharing was these traditions about the native two-spirited people, which we talked about in the previous. But basically, in many native cultures, there was a distinct and honorable place for folks that we would identify as queer. Right? That they were the medicine people, they were tenders of the children, but they were clearly in the spirit and the flesh in this particular book that the anthropologist talks about all these different traditions and all these different cultures. Like, for instance, if I thought Nick was my son and I thought maybe he's going to walk this path, there was a ritual. And they would build this big arbor, and in the middle would be a bow and arrow and a basket. And they would light the arbor on fire. And then they throw you in. And if you grab the basket, then what you're saying is, I'm walking the path of the two-spirit. And if you grab the bow and arrow, then I'm walking the path of, right? But the idea was to ritualistically declare to the community what path you were on. And if you were going to walk that two-spirited path, then you were kind of turned over to the elders and nurtured to honor that medicine about yourself. And I remember hearing about this and reading about it and just going, it like blew my mind.
Yeah.
And the reason it blew my mind is it was so outside the domesticated ideas. It was so original and brilliant.
But let me just also say that was marketing that was some really positive marketing for us gays back then, right? Like what you just described with that, holy shit, that's freaking cool. That's a rite of passage. That's an honor. That's not you have to have this size of chest and you should be shirtless most of the time and you have a gaby. It's just the social media of who we need to be and what you just explained. Like I want that. That's what I want. I want to be in that realm. I can easily see how I could participate in something like that. That place wants me.
Come to the retreat. We're going to burn down your room and see what you bring out. If you bring your jockstrap, you know who you are. If you bring a bowl of flowers.
Yeah.
But here's my point. Back in the 90s, when I heard about this, I was just like it just gave meaning to the story. And what I've learned throughout the years, and I was just trying to look this up a second ago, like for instance, this came later, but when I met Melodoma, very first time I met him, I noticed he would get up early in the morning, and I'm an early riser, and he'd go and sit by the coals of this fire and smoke a cigar. And I thought, oh, this is going to be my opportunity to get to know him, because I get up early in the morning. So I'd go and I'd take my little pipe out there, and we would smoke together. So I asked him some questions based on some readings I'd had with him, but I asked him about this idea of the queer people in his community. And in the Dagra people, their idea of sexuality, like it's almost non-existent. Because what was more important was the capacity and how you showed up in the community. Exactly. And the folks that we would call queer in his community showed up as gatekeepers of the specifics of the rituals. And he would say, our people could not exist without those gatekeepers.
Right, you have the people that are attending to the children and to the families, and you have the people that are attending to the traditions and the knowledge that has to be passed down to those families and those people.
But I guess what I'm offering is for me to challenge my own internalized homophobia. This was a distinct invitation to explore the sacredness and the gift.
It's tough. I know we've said these words before, the sacredness and the gift. It's still, I love that story. I can feel it. I love visualizing that. I just love that type of story. At the same time, when we get to this place of the importance of experiencing the gift, I still can't get it.
Okay, so can I work with you for a minute?
Yes.
What is when you hear that, it comes up against what?
The idea that someone would respect me for being alive. The idea that someone would think I have a gift, I guess, is what it is. Because I don't think I have a gift.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask. Do you believe there's something sacred about what you offer?
I guess I just believe too much that everyone else thinks it's not.
Yeah.
That becomes so heavy. That becomes...
Right. How do you keep a light going when you're so suffocated by that around you all the time? Like, how do you get a light to glow? I think that's what it is I just get too tied up in the assumptuous state of the mind and all the ideas of what people are thinking about you, which is just bullshit, because who knows what it is and isn't, but it becomes suffocating. And so, I can't understand how I have a gift. Yeah. Because I'm certainly not thinking to myself that everyone out there thinks that I have a gift.
So if I'm not able to, and now I'm going back to those scenarios we talked about, they don't see the mastery of my yoga. They don't see the mastery of what I'm bringing into the world as a gay, right? Like, if I walk into a party, they ignore me. Is that because there's some part of me that's ignoring my own gift?
And that perceived pressure that I can't shine.
Right, it's a double whammy.
Yeah.
You're doing it to yourself, and then you're thinking they're
Then it gets
doing it to you also.
Yeah, it gets reinforced.
Yeah.
And then I project my anger
Mm-hmm.
because how dare them?
Yeah, right.
How dare them not see what I don't see?
Right, and then I'm sorry, but that in my mind that feeds being an introvert. That's just like, fuck it. These people are nuts. I can't do this to myself anymore. I'm just gonna go home and smoke weed or what, like that. That's for me. That's what the cycle feels like.
Mm-hmm.
Is getting to that place of it's still the same, and I just can't do this.
I know people can relate to this, just not even feeling that they have a gift or a talent or anything that they could offer. That's probably a good majority of, our folks out there. We're putting voice to it, which I appreciate, because it's getting me to think a little bit more about this and even more so what we're doing. Because I'm hoping that we're becoming that ceremonial
Absolutely.
celebration space.
Let's begin the work.
That people, when they do, because they will, when they get over that hump of the anxiety of, I can't show up, I can't get through the gate, because I don't feel like I'm going to fit. But they eventually do. Like that one gentleman, but there's many people who've had that experience of not showing up fully. They get to the door, but they don't go through the threshold. But eventually they do, and I have to commend them. And when they do, and they are invited in to this circle that we're fostering, or at least trying to, and bring back to life this queer spirit aspect and community service, that what we're inviting them to do is come in and start to shed that weight by participating in ceremony. I'm using air quotes because anything could be ceremony.
Yeah, a board game.
A board
anything,
game,
social,
right?
Yeah, of course, right.
Or ceremony like lodge, ceremony like pipe, ceremony like dance, ceremony like singing, ceremony like a game night. They can be celebrations and opportunities for, hopefully, that weight, it becomes a little lighter, a little lighter, a little lighter, and eventually dissolves so people can then see themselves. Because I feel like when I think about myself politically, because we were talking about this earlier, I'm not a person that's going to be out on the Capitol with my sign and picket sign and signing things and chanting and all of that. And sometimes I feel bad about that I'm not out there with my brothers and sisters protesting. But I found, and now what I believe for myself, like my platform is actually the yoga mat. When I get to teach
For sure.
in front of my folks out there, I may not be talking about politics and sexuality and all that stuff, but what I am inviting them to do is pay attention to yourself. Take care of yourself.
Focus on these things.
Focus on these things.
Yeah.
Breathe.
Yeah.
If you're feeling heavy,
Yeah.
take a deep breath and maybe you'll feel a little lighter. So I'm inviting them to my little ceremony of, hopefully they can feel a little lighter, see themselves more clearly so they could be bright out there.
I see.
And I would offer that to anybody.
Yeah.
That's kind of my response.
So that's the solution then, these moments of work, these moments of ceremony that that can look different but ultimately are opportunities to come into situations with people where that weight is suspended and we're just having interactions and they're simple but they're fulfilling and rewarding and they're validating and you've done it with other people and something is built, something tangible. The peripheral horseshit of what we're supposed to be is not even a part of it. We're just talking and I've learned something from you and it's made me feel better about myself and I'm appreciative of it. And yeah, that's the stuff that's hard to do when people feel rejected by their community. They're looking for things in social media to identify with. Tribalism comes and all of a sudden we got the gays that are no fats, no femmes, no Asians, whatever, the breaking up into these tribes again because they're all just scared to be who they are, and so they don't know who they are, and so they identify with these stupid, silly things that none of us want to be a part of, and it's just this vortex of blah. But you're right, to create and hold this space for us to come together, whether it's a board night, whether a board game, whether it's yoga, whatever it is, it's opportunity to just experience something real and tangible with fellow humans, and that's the solution to this problem, I think, that we're identifying.
Yeah, I have a friend and an elder. In fact, I called him as we were coming here and say, Charles, you need to listen to our podcast. And maybe someday we'll get him on our podcast.
Yes.
In fact, he'll probably be out here in May, so we might want to do that. But he will rock our world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I remember Charles will be 90 years old this year.
Wow.
And that man has more energy than most 40-year-olds and is bright as a whip. And what I know about Charles is he's always been deeply, deeply committed to this work about self-evolution, if you will. And he is a provocateur in terms of how he thinks about things. And I remember going, I forget where I was with him, but just having this conversation, and he was somewhere in his 80s, and he's just like, I radically disavow the narratives around aging.
Absolutely.
And and I remember thinking, wow. And he is the living manifestation of that disavowment. Like, he's just not committed to that space energetically. And so I sometimes wonder, how would that concept apply? Like, what would radical self-acceptance look like? Like, if I could just radically, revolutionarily embrace, like I try to imagine what I would be doing differently, how I would feel it in my body, how I would bring it in, how I would be communicating with myself. And I'm just going to tease that for a moment and go back to a piece Carl Jung used to talk about, the wounded healer.
Yeah.
And I think that might be something for us to reflect on, right? That we're casting this circle and we're calling, come and join us. Let's do this work together. Let's shift the cultural narrative that is about radical self-acceptance. And to do that, then we each are doing our own work. We're each having our own vulnerable process. And I've said this before, I think it's interesting what the last year has been like for me, because I'm recognizing things that I've never heard out of myself before that Mr. over here keeps putting back at
Shouting
me.
at you, yes.
Shush. But I reflect on it and I think, man, how have I all these years missed this? Like, how, and places where I've just kind of settled into a way of being, assuming that's how it's supposed to be. That this whole new radical revisualization of myself requires me to stretch. Radical self-acceptance, and I'm using the word radical because it means I have to deliberately step away from the narratives that have held me hostage.
Yes, that's the piece. That's the piece. That's the radical movement, because I think we're stuck in a rut. If we have a problem, we're anxious, we're sad, we're depressed, and so we go to the app. We go to the social media. We go to alcohol. We go to the thing over and over and over again. And as we know, right, it might be a temporary little fix, but it's not a solution to the root problem.
It drives the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the radical, I got to get out of that rut. I need to shift my story. And it means doing something kind of drastic, something way out of your box, something that is extraordinary.
A retreat.
But even the extraordinary could be come to a game night.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be so grand, you know, in someone's head, because people might be thinking, retreat, you know, and all the excuses that might come along with that.
Well, it's like the game nights. It's not like we're saying there's going to be 30 people there. We're saying we're shooting for 6 to 8.
Yeah,
The retreats are usually 8
yeah,
folks.
right.
The book club,
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing, is going to be about 8 people,
Right,
which I think is the perfect space.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, to test the waters. I mean, but for you, the person that's listening, that might be a big step for you. And but we invite you, and the door is open. Try it out. Even if, because I hosted a movie night, and one of the folks that showed up almost didn't show up. The car pulled up, and I could see the car pull up, and I waited, like, where's the person? Finally came to the door, and we got into conversation, and they said, I almost left. I drove up, parked, and sat, but I almost drove away.
That's
Yeah.
but that's where we are. That's what we have to be here for that. Because we're all in that same place. We all can feel and identify with doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is so important for us to do this, to push ourselves outside, because I'm the same way. I would be that person in the car maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, I need to be the one hosting the movie night for that person. And that's the wounded healer aspect of this, is that I know that that's what I need to do to help myself in this situation, to turn it around. I need to make eye contact and say hello to that person and talk to them, and try to get the veil crap out of here so we can just connect and be humans. But if I do want to say also, as you're talking to, to people listening, even their choice to listen to this podcast is a step.
It is.
Because it's an acknowledgement of your awareness that I need some medicine. I need to do something different than what I've been doing by trying to identify with the Kardashians, or whatever it is. These things that are put before us, and it is acknowledgement just by listening to this podcast and letting it in and considering these things. That is a massive step towards healing and towards changing and toward maybe radical change. But Jerry, I just want to say one thing in particular with your associate. You said he's in his 90s.
Yeah,
he's 90 now.
He'll be 90 this year.
Okay, and so we might get to meet him in May.
Yes.
But and the thing that that is extremely exciting for me as this evidence-based nutrition and fitness coach is that and this because I'm putting them right in front of you every time I see them. But we now have these amazing examples of people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s that are understanding and living a physical trajectory of life that is not at all what we thought the ancestors, what we've been shown examples for so many decades of life. It's very different now. And so I think a part of that radicalism, that radical change that needs to happen, is specifically when it comes to this issue, when it comes to aging and what's my place in this world as I become old, is knowing that, well, it's entirely dependent upon what you're putting in your mouth and the activity and the way you're moving your body in this world. Because the truth is that old age trajectory of just becoming less and little and tiny and frail, that's not what has to happen. And that, to me, is a radical change, because I know so many have been programmed. I'm watching all of my aunts go down the same path that their grandmother did, that their great-great-great, and it's the pills and the potions and the air tanks and the scooters and the not moving and the dying for the next 10 years very slowly. And it's culturally accepted. And so that's a radical change, in my opinion. The evidence that we have now, the fucking the Instagram accounts that we have of the 70-year-old that never exercised in his life until he's 70. He starts rowing. He's 90, and he's a competitive rower.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that shit gives me chills. And so that's who we need to be focusing on now when we're trying to answer our questions of, what's my place in this world as I age. It's not a dismal existence. In fact, it's looking pretty kick-ass to me.
Absolutely. It's surrounding ourselves or being exposed to the possibility, rather than always going back to the rote and the things that take us deeper into that dark cave. Expose yourself to the things that are going to inspire you, motivate you, or just things that you just like. It's like,
Definitely.
that's interesting, and get wrapped up in that energy, because that's going to be part of the shift.
So this might be an interesting way to kind of tie this out. So we talked about radical acceptance,
Yeah.
talked about kind of confronting our own internalized homophobia,
Yeah.
finding our own voice, our own authenticity, our own value in our queerness, our own sacredness. So I'm wondering, what can we commit to as individuals here? Like, what radical acts are we willing to engage in to shift our own story? And I'll start because I've been practicing in my head. I never set a New Year's resolution, but for the last couple of years, I find a term or a concept that I try to align myself with during the year. So last year, it was magical manifestations. Expecting magical manifestations. So just to be in awe of something showing up or manifesting in my life, that was my goal. This year, I've landed on the word pleasure. And so I want to have, so on my screensaver on my computer, it says pleasure for 2024, body, mind, and spirit. And I came to that because I recognized how I am one that likes to accomplish a lot of things, and I do it for the sake of accomplishment, and I want to be able to experience more pleasure.
Yeah.
And so I was actually thinking about, how would I experience more pleasure in my body? Like, I feel like I'm having this new body experience. And so I know I have these edges about my body. And we've talked about this, like, I will avoid at great lengths water parks, pools. I don't want to be seen in a bathing suit. And this year I'm going to buy a sexy bathing suit, and I'm going to go swimming, and I'm going to just have pleasure. And I'm going to be conscious of the fear and anxiety, but I'm going to also make room for self-acceptance and pleasure with that.
Love that. Pleasure.
And I have till August.
Exactly.
What came to mind for me as far as something I want to do and kind of do my radical shift, because I can easily talk myself out of things. I'm pretty independent. I'm not in a partnership, and even the little things, and I live in a home by myself, and so I've got to be accountable for everything that I do. And so it's easy just to not do something, because no one's saying, John, get up off the couch and do that. I've got to do that. And sometimes it's just hard. Now at home it's a little bit different, but out in the world, I do the same thing. And it doesn't serve me very well to always retract, and maybe not. I don't think I should do that. I'll just go through this whole weird scenario in my head, make up all these excuses of why I shouldn't or can't or don't do something.
So you get to a comfortable place, so you're giving yourself permission to not do it.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I happened to hear some other podcast, and it was some motivational person, and they were talking about how to kind of get through something like this. And it was just a simple thing. They said, if one of those thoughts pops into your head, like, oh, I can't do that, just count, I think they said count backwards from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as a way of kind of letting go of that thought, and then just do it. It doesn't seem like it's much, but I've tried it a couple times, and it seemed to work. Instead of, I would hear myself start to talk myself out of something, started to count backwards because it shifted my thinking, and then that thought was gone, and I was able to just do it. I want to do more of that.
No, that's taking control. That it's interesting because both of what you're saying are actually both of where I'm at with it. One is my comfort in me thinking about being a host of community is terrifying. So it's not. That's something I got to have tequila shots for. That's not how I'm feeling right this moment, but that's how I definitely have felt in the past. And so doing this putting myself out in this way is part of that for me. Is I'm challenging myself with stretching into positions and places that I normally haven't been, because I know that that's what my community needs of me, and I know that that is absolutely what I need of my community. So I know that I'm glad we started the show with the example that you did about going to the party and me saying, me thinking about having to do that, I'd have to pregame. That's what I want to tackle. I want to tackle the social anxiety I have. And it's not that it's crippling. I think I have a solution. It's just to throw back a few drinks. And let me be clear, I don't do that. I haven't had drinks in so long. It's like, but it's just, I don't want to have that in my Rolodex of options anymore. Mm-hmm. I want to reprogram. I want to stop it, and I want to count to 5, and I want to have a different reaction. And I'm finding I'm able to do that more with. So that is my New Year's resolution, is to be more of a host of community and putting myself into that uncomfortable place. But also at the same time, I too have a device for dealing with that assumptuous mind that you start to, just all the wild shit that can come in and the emotions that can come around, the very real feeling of these made up things that you're dealing with. And a tactic that I've used, and I think I heard it on a podcast also, I can't remember for sure, but it's that you take a moment, take a breath, and you focus on the feeling of that emotion only, and you stay with it. You don't let anything else come in. Just focus on that emotion, and it dissipates. It just completely disappears, and then you're able to breathe, and you have a clearer mind, and you realize that you kind of just taken control of your assumptuous mind, and you're in a different place right now. And so those, basically what you two both have said, those are also, for me, these are resolutions for me that I'm working on. I'm happy with myself that I am able to stop that cycle. I'm starting to recognize, I think like you are, that I have it within me to no longer be confined by that, and I have a little more control. In fact, I have quite a bit more control, and that's my New Year's resolution, I think, is to have better control over my assumptuous mind.
Love it.
So it's interesting. We started the conversation talking about what it is about the gay community that edges us out. And as I'm listening to us kind of wrap this up, what I'm hearing is that may be a lot of projection of just our own personal edges, our own personal insecurities. If I felt more confident about my body, if I felt more confident about what I offer or what I bring into it, right, that I may be able to show up and not be drawn into the voices of others, and to really kind of stand into my own strength.
Very well said. A lot of the disdain we have for our community, we're making up in our minds. It is, and we will say it. We're going to say it for the entire time we're doing these, I'm sure. Yes, social media is the culprit. Yes, the information age that we're in, it's not so great. The pendulum is swinging. It is going off into this direction where there's this anonymity in social media, and there's this troll-like behavior, and it's just this grody place to be a part of. But yet, all the examples of what we're supposed to be are kind of being highlighted there, but none of it connects. And so I think that, I can see that, Jerry, that it's our own issues, and then the way in which we project or think we understand what the community is out there about. But the truth is we just need fucking board games. We just need to come we just need to sit down and have conversations. I just said this to you last night. I think the important thing for us to remember with these podcasts is we're just 3 friends sitting down talking. And that's such a powerful thing. And again, and that is medicine for some people because they don't have that opportunity. I told you in the beginning doing this for me, I was so enthusiastic because I have no people to talk about my gay shit with. I can talk to my partner about it, but there's bias there, and it's just not, it's not this. And I'm not going to talk to my father about my gay problems because my father doesn't fucking know anything about what it is, so yeah, I'm definitely feeling better about establishing a better sense of community and being a part of it, because I think that's definitely, as we've always said, just the medicine that we need.
Yeah.
We want to hear from you. We've been having these conversations, and one of the things that we said at the very beginning of this is that we're not experts on any of this. And as Nick just said, we're just a couple of guys getting together and just talking about stuff, and hopefully providing a platform, an arena where you can listen, maybe even participate. And so we do want to hear from you. What questions do you have? What things you want to start to unburden? So maybe visit our website and see what kind of activities we have going on. It's mindfullygay.com. You can certainly contact us through email, info@mindfullygay.com, and even just check us out on some social media. So we are on social media. It's mindfully_gay. That's our Instagram. But if that's your way of stepping in, then by all means.
Yeah.
And if you're that person that drives up but then drives away, don't feel ashamed by that. And that was one of the things that I told that one guest when he did come in. He's like, I felt bad because I was going to drive away, and I've done that before. That's normal. Mm-hmm. That may happen. That might even happen to you. But there's going to be a moment when you do show up, and we invite you to show up. And we're going to try to do our best and show up for you. So that concludes this episode, and we hope you continue to show up with us on future episodes of Mindfully Gay.
Thank you for joining us on the Mindfully Gay podcast. We hope today's episode, Feeling Edged Out, has resonated with you.
Remember, you're not alone in this journey. We're all learning and growing together.
Be sure to tune in next time for our heartfelt conversations. Until then, stay mindful and keep embracing your true self.